First of all, can you all hear me? Harvey, you'll be honest with me. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. There's a microphone here, but I got to hold it in the hand, all that kind of thing. I'm just going to try to speak, and if all of a sudden you can't hear, raise your hand if you would. And I'm going to tell you that my talk tonight is not going to be all history, because I don't know all the history. Some of you may know some things that I don't know. I get my history from Sarah, who I'll talk more about, but my talk would be better phrased, I suppose, as a combination of a bit of history that I learned from Sarah Hammond, great remembrances of a long, many-year project that I went through with her, and the great memories of what I wrote down last night, a wonderful, energized, go-get-em woman who I not only respected, but became really good friends with. And she was truly a wonderful person. This graveyard was the burial ground for virtually the entire black population of the Kernersville community prior to the Civil War. I believe the oldest marker here is from 1871. But as I said, the African American families buried their loved ones here long before the Civil War. And it was marked in here from those early days with just uncut, unmarked in any way, stones that would be placed. There was not the money to go out and to mark a stone that went down. And so these many uncarved rocks and so forth remain here today and as anonymous graves. Lest you think that this is not a living cemetery. The last burial I know of was David Church, who was 74 and was buried here in February. After the Civil War, several black members of the Methodist Episcopal Church established a new church to be known as St. Paul's Methodist Episcopal Church. As I recall from Sarah, the St. Paul's congregation purchased the Methodist Episcopal Church building from what is now Main Street United Methodist Church. We have no record of how much he was, how much exchanged hands, how much was a gift, but that's where the building came from. And it was moved to the site of this graveyard. Originally, the cemetery was tucked right next to the church. That church was the third organized church in Kernersville and the first for African Americans. Why was Sarah so driven to see this graveyard restored? And I think that you all know that she was, and I will talk more about her as we go. But it was Sarah's great-grandparents. They'd be your great-great-grandparents. George and Sarah Elizabeth, George and Sarah Elizabeth Taylor, who donated the land for the church to be moved to. It remains at the corner of Church and New Streets. St. Paul's congregation over the years unfortunately dwindled, and so did the upkeep of this cemetery. Eventually, many graves were forgotten, and many of the new residents coming to Kernersville didn't even know that this was here. In fact, a lot of older citizens of the town didn't know that it was here. And sitting just feet from, and it's gotten more busy, but from a busy street, it's really kind of odd that it was not. No. I will tell you that there were paper streets here. When I say paper streets, these were streets that were set out in drawings by developers and put on record at the courthouse. They outlined the lots which builders would come along and build on. And they outlined streets on them and dedicated them when they recorded the plats. There were two streets. One came up, which is along Sally Greenfield's driveway over here, and another one comes right along the fence line here and goes on into what is now Cagnes. The town of, when we started into this project, we asked the town to go ahead and cut the street off from here down through Cagnes so that this would remain separate. But the streets coming up here and down here remain as dedicated streets. No, they're not paved or even well graveled, but they are in fact streets, and they give us access to the cemetery. My first encounters with this cemetery were in the first days of my practice of law in the early 70s. We Moravians call this a graveyard, but most folks call it a cemetery. If I slip and call it a graveyard, I'm sorry. I'm just used to calling it that. And I'll probably use those terms interchangeably as we go through. But I would come here while doing title searches. You went to buy a house, go to the bank and borrow money, and they would require, and attorneys would advise buyers, to have a title search to make sure that the property did belong to the proposed seller of that property to you. Well, back in the early 70s, there were not a whole lot of records, number one, other than those from the Register of Deeds. And secondly, it was very difficult for attorneys to search titles because we had to go back at least 60 years. Today, you only go back 35, 40 years, but back then you went back 60 years, so you were going too close to the turn of the former century, 1900s. And so a lot of our title searchers would go back in the 1800s because land would be held in the 1800s and then not sold until the early 1900s. And so it was common for attorneys to go out into cemeteries to try to find the names of the individuals, of the families of the particular individual who was going to sell his or her property. And so I would come down here. I would get to where the gate, I wouldn't even get that far. I'd get back by the house where Sally has restored. And you couldn't get through here. It was so grown up with vines and poison oak and ivy and the prickly everything in here, and you could not see literally from where I'm standing down to that clump of trees right there. Yet there were graves all the way down to the end of the graveyard. I received, well, let me tell you, you're going to hear Sarah Hamlin all throughout this. She was a member of the Friend family of Kernersville, and that was a great family, very education-minded. I think there were 8 children. You all chime up if you know more than I do. There were 8 children, and every one of them graduated from college, and they mostly became teachers, right? On point. And that one became a very good friend, Palmer friend. Palmer taught, retired from the school system. They asked him to come back, and he became assistant superintendent of Forsyth County Schools. If you ever have the opportunity, how many have seen, how many knew Paul? Okay. So about, and how many have seen the video of Palmer and his talk to Leadership Kernersville? And how many have heard that talk? Well, there's a bunch of you that could really get a wonderful experience if you get your hands on, and I think you can, a video or an audio recording of Palmer talking about growing up as a young black man in the 1940s in Kernersville. Absolutely wonderful. He was a friend of everybody in town, from Spiro to just everybody. And to hear him talk about growing up at that time, I don't know off the cemetery, but I got to tell you about Paul, because he was a great man and a great friend, pun intended. And he was just full of stories about Kernersville and how he came along, shining shoes, how he was treated, what he did, how he got to school, how he got through school, came back as a teacher, and how he worked himself up through the school system to, as I say, become assistant superintendent of the system. The point I'm making with the Friend family is that Sarah grew up in a very educated family, and she wanted, louder? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And Sarah wanted to make sure that this was in fact protected. And so her great-grandparents bought the property on New and Church Streets and moved the church from down here up there, where it has been ever since. And so she was very interested in the church, even though she moved up to Winston-Salem and worked in Winston-Salem. She was always here in Kernersville. And she was always desirous of making sure that the legacy found here on these sacred grounds was protected for the future, that somebody knew about it. This was a massively overgrown forest, an acre and a quarter forest that you just couldn't even get to. And in fact, Sarah didn't want to come in here. She wanted to restore this, but she didn't want to come down here because she was really afraid of it. She really was. Unfortunately, there was also the element of individuals who would come down at night. Neil, as former police chief, can tell you about this.
We got a few there.
They would come down and they would be drinking or otherwise, all in here and causing damage, tipping over stones, defacing them with paint. It was a nightmare for the Kernersville Police Department. How my involvement began. Sarah came to me one day and said, "I need your help." And I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "Well," and she gave me 3 deeds and said, "I've got these 3 deeds, but I know one of them has got to be that cemetery down on South Main Street. Belongs to St. Paul's. Can you help me figure out which it is?" So I told her that I'd need to draw them out, and you do that with a protractor, ruler, and so forth, and you take the descriptions, which used to go from a white elm to a stone to a creek, and they were in stones and this kind of measurement. But I figured it out, and I had to go back to Sarah and tell her the bad news. The none of those 3 deeds fit the cemetery. I looked for more deeds at the Register of Deeds in Winston-Salem, couldn't find anything. And I finally told Sarah that if she could give me any lead to how far back the deed into St. Paul's might go, I might be able to come up with it, because Forsyth County comes from Stokes County, and it was broken off from Stokes County in 1851. So if you want any records from the Register of Deeds or the Book of Court, you have to go up to Stokes County to find those. Well, she couldn't give me any help as far as time frame, but I went up to Stokes County, again, searched everything I could, and never could find a deed that came into the church from up there. I had to come back and tell Sarah that I just couldn't find anything. She was very disappointed, just really down. And she said, well, we've got to have something, because I really want to see it restored. And I told her that, honestly, in my legal opinion, it really didn't matter. The reason that it didn't matter is that it was a graveyard. It would always be protected by North Carolina law, and that whoever it belonged to was not going to lose the cemetery. No one could come in and build here, couldn't get a building permit. Nobody would come in and clean it up and try to sell it off. They couldn't sell it off for anything. And so, in essence, while we could not prove that this was deeded to St. Paul, it certainly, by all oral history, showed that it did belong to the church. The church was healed, and that she needn't worry, and let's go on with your project. But I didn't say let's us go on. Well, you can imagine what happened. By that time, Sarah she had a way about her, and she got me hooked. I used to kid her about it, but I felt it was a way to give back to the community. It was something that should be cleaned up, properly maintained, should be a credit to the town of Kernersville, and respect those individuals who were buried here and the families whose loved ones were here. I knew Chip Calloway. It's funny how things come around in your life. When I say I knew him, I had heard of Chip. And I knew that he had worked on a black cemetery in Greensboro. One of a church, and I can't remember which one it is. You might be able to tell me. It's on Main Street, great big black cemetery that has been restored. But Chip had worked on that, and so I called Chip up, introduced myself, and I said, I need some help. I'm trying to help someone restore the black cemetery in Kernersville. Can you tell me anything about what you went through? I understand you restored Black Cemetery in Greensboro and so forth. Well, Chip, nice as he was, said, I'll just meet you all over there one day. We set up a time. Chip met us over there, and we walked around and studied, and he imparted what he knew. And how best to design and to restore and be a place of accessibility while being respectful to those who are there, and how to maintain it, and so forth. Chip is a renowned, nationally known landscape architect. For those of you who don't know him, he also became very involved with the Paul J. Singer Botanical Garden, and is for whom the Chip Calloway lecture series that the garden puts on is named for the trip. I then became involved with Chip, sitting on the board of directors of the garden. And so Chip and I had a new life together on that. He later went in, I'm going to skip around a little bit because things just come to my mind, but Chip later went into business with Mark Peters. Mark Peters had started out after graduating from college and doing landscape architecture. He worked for Paul Singer. And after Paul passed away, Mark acquired Carolina Piedmont Nursery. Well, since that time, Chip has gone in with Mark, so they are together. Before that, I got a hold of Mark and I said I need a favor from him. And so Mark and his crew, the ones that did all of the stone pillars that are here in the cemetery. And it was done, I think, I'm sure, even below his cost of labor for the folks who did it. There are a lot of people that have been involved in this. Sarah and I started giving up responsibilities that we would have. She knew much of history and the people of contact in the church and the families who had loved ones out here. I had many contacts that I thought that might be willing to work on a community project like this. We applied for and we got grants from the Kernersville Historic Preservation Society, the Marion Stedman Covington Foundation, and the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources. And that mounted up well over, it was between, I think it was like $20,000 that we had. And Sarah and I worked on those grants, and we're really proud that we were able to get those, because without that seed money, we would not have been able to do the fencing that you see around here. And Sarah, right away, because we talked about it, she knew we had to get it enclosed some way to try to keep people out. By the same token, we were told by Neil and others who looked after the protection of places like this, that you don't want someone to get in here that the police can't get into. So we came up with a plan, and there is an outer rim right outside the fencing that is a gravel road all the way around. That had been a path in the past, but we knew we wanted to be able to get around it. We wanted the police department to be able to come around it and check it out. And so we said we would take fencing and put it on the inside and leave an entranceway, a gate, which you see back here. Actually, one for the cars, and this is for the folks who would come in. Sarah came back and said, well, I've been all over and I've gotten all kinds of prices on aluminum fencing. And she said, I've got a bid of $15,000 to go around the cemetery with aluminum fencing. And I sat down and I said, Sarah, you want this to last. And frankly, if you put down aluminum fencing, it's going to get torn up. It's going to be down in years to come. So I turned around and went to a good friend, fellow churchman, G.W. Gibson. You all may know G.W. G.W. until his retirement had G.W. Gibson Welding and Ironworks. And I talked to G.W. and I said, is there anything you might be able to help us with? Well, G.W. came in and put the wrought iron fencing around all of this for the $15,000 that was the low bid on the aluminum. It was that kind of thing that came from the community. Meanwhile, Sarah was doing extensive research with those families who had loved ones here, with her church folk, and she was documenting everything that she could about who was here. That was very, very difficult because only in the later years could we get back to anything. There are so few marked graves in it that you just can't get a feeling of who was buried back in the 1800s. And it is such a shame. It's only by those family members who had loved ones that they knew were down here that could say, well, my great uncle or my great great grandfather or whoever I know is buried there, but I can't tell you where. But that didn't really matter to us at that point when we got through it, because we felt it was more important to save the graveyard as a whole, a resting place for over 200 people that we know of. 200 people who died and were placed here, and they deserve the respect of a Kernersville community. And so we forged on. I talked with Randy McCaslin, who was town manager at that time, Charlie Hamilton, who was the public works director. And I brought them down here and I said, you got to help me out. So we talked about it. Randy was good with it. I went before the Board of Aldermen, asked the aldermen if they'd stand by the project. And town forces were the very first to come out and do work out here. The town forces came out and started cutting down trees because there were so many in here, you could hardly walk in here for the trees. From little tiny saplings up to the trees you see here. And we kept as many as we thought we could. Many of you who have been out here and who have raked in the fall would probably say you didn't cut enough. And maybe that's that. But as Joe was saying earlier, it is so serene to come back in here and just to look at a stone that's marked 18, something that I was looking at a few minutes ago. I'll sit there and just look at a stone and imagine the person who's lying, the person who was deceased before 1850. Well, town forces started here. Meanwhile, I went to the local manager. I got a hold of Charlie and sat down with Charlie. And I said, I don't understand, how much stone do we buy from Vulcan and Martin Marietta and then anybody else? And Charlie told me. And we bought most of our stone from Martin Marietta. So I got on the phone and I called the local manager and I described what we had. and didn't think I got too far, but he finally agreed that he would come out. So he and Charlie and I came out here, and I said, any help that you would give us, we really would appreciate it. The town buys a lot of stone, and that's not to say that you can't just turn us down, but if you do something for the community, I think it would really be appreciated by the community. Well, lo and behold, Martin Marietta gave us all of the stone for the road. And the town forces came in and began cutting down all around the exterior of the fencing, all the way around back, and made a complete oval. We had some problems in the lower corner back there. There was a lot of water, but we built it up. We brought in dirt, and we sculptured it, and we wound up with a full road around it. We, of course, saw the need for other kind of cleaning, not the cutting down of the big trees and all, but just the cleaning up of the jungle that was in here. And Joe started mentioning some of the names of the folks who came in and helped us do that. And I probably won't get all of them. You can see a lot of them on this plaque here. But we asked students from East Forsyth High School. It was headed at that time. Jim Welburn had retired, and Debbie Brooks had taken over. I'm throwing some names out so that some of you remember these folks. I knew Debbie well, and asked her. Bobby and I were co-presidents of PTA at one time, and so we got to know Debbie. And I asked her if she might find some students who would become involved. She came through with those students. Sarah got some fraternities and sororities to come down. And we got the 4-H and some scouts. You mentioned somebody that I hadn't thought about. I can't remember who it was. But there were all kinds of the Cosby, yes, that came down. But it took a lot of coordination, but it was also a tremendous amount of help. Young folks have the energy, and so with some help, they were able to do just an enormous amount. Community folks came down on their own. Community leaders, Alderman Ivy Redden, I think you all know from an email sent out, Ivy just suffered a stroke. Marion Martin came down and would cook barbecue and chicken and beans, and we would just have a picnic out here for all the groups that would come in. I wrote off, I got something, a card in from the American Floral Society with and offering bulbs to organizations. You remember that, and they were free. And so we sent off and got back thousands of bulbs. And folks came down here and dug all around here with bulbs of daffodils and tulips and that kind of thing. Now we're talking about back in the 90s, so those are gone. They need to be replenished. But it was really beautiful when those came up down here, and it really meant a whole lot to come down and see color in the springtime and to walk away. Kernersville Middle School, the Hawk leaders out there, the service organization, they got the Kernersville Middle School students to come and clean up the graves for several years. I want you all to know how much this society has meant to this cemetery over the years, because first name up there, as far as donors, was the Kernersville Historic Preservation Society. Y'all came through not only with finances, but you came through with hard work, and those before you that were members of this society came out and just did a tremendous amount of muscle work. Cleaning, raking, planting. It was amazing, all of those folks coming out. Our problem was, and our problem continues to be, the foot of leaves that you found out here. You know, you need to do one of two things. You clear it off like it's been cleared off across South Main Street, or you try to keep this kind of atmosphere. But you got to maintain it. You got to rake up those leaves, and that's really. Now I saw some stone out of that pillar down there that need to be repaired. The main things are clipping little saplings, going through and raking, planting some flowers. It's that kind of maintenance. I've often thought if everybody in the Kernersville Historic Preservation Society would go out and just get one or two of their neighbors and all come down, could make a tremendous amount of difference. When former mayor and longtime supporter of Kernersville, Joseph Harmon Linville, died, he left many wonderful gifts to organizations in town. From the Folly to the Depot, so many civic organizations have had projects underway to beautify Kernersville. And that included the restoration of this cemetery and the Kernersville Historic Preservation Society. Y'all have been extremely prudent. You still have that initial amount. It's earning interest. But you were prudent in doing that and then and using the money that Harmon left for the benefit of this great cemetery. And it'll be here and it'll be maintained from now on if some folks will come and just do some work. It can make it. I mean, it's made it for nigh on to 20 years. At the end of the project, we decided to do this plaque. Sarah was worried it was going to get defaced, torn up, stolen, whatever. And I said, I really don't think so. I think that it will stay here. And I'm proud to say it is. And a lot of what I've said, you can read up here. The donors, as well as some of the history. It's a special. I have to tell you, it's a special place to me. And I think that if you come down here, like Joe said, and find the peace and quiet back in this cemetery, if you read some gravestones, if you just sit and let your mind wander, it can be a wonderful thing for you. If you come down here and work, it could be a wonderful thing for you too, because it'll give you a sense of giving back to the community. I'm going to leave you with, and he's already stolen my thunder on you, but I was going to leave you with two quotes. Or I should say quotes, a combination of quotes, really from two individuals. One in her 80s at the time and another in his early teens. And I think they say it all. Evan White was an 8th grader many years ago, and he said, I enjoy the link between Kernersville Middle School and the historic cemetery. Serving the community shows people that we are caring and being raised to think of other people. This is important because the cemetery is part of our town's history. These people were an integral part of our history long ago. And Sarah said what Joe said. There are over 200 people buried here. It's important for people to have the history that's found here. I get asked, are there any prominent citizens buried here? I tell them, everyone here is prominent. They made Kernersville what it is today. These are sacred grounds, and I hope that you all will continue your efforts in the support of this cemetery. I understand that this is y'all's key project for 2017, getting groups together, developing a plan to address the current and future needs of this cemetery. All I can say is thank you all very, very much for what you do. Not only am I appreciative, but there's a good woman up in heaven who's looking down, and she's appreciative of it too. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. And you certainly enlightened me on some things I didn't know, and I'm sure all of you will too. But I encourage you, like I said before, come out here one day when you've got about an hour and just start walking through and imagine the people that are buried out there. I often compare it to my church, Main Street Methodist, and how neatly manicured and maintained it is with the expensive markers. And we're at this cemetery, and it makes you realize it doesn't matter. We're all the same. And it takes a place like this to open up your eyes and make you realize that. I never will forget, I was out here about a year ago, and I had some scouts from Main Street Methodist, and they had worked hard. They really worked hard. And the scoutmaster said, I wish you'd gather these boys around. We were about halfway through, and explain to them what they've done, what they're doing, how important it is. So I did. I called them all around and told them a little bit of the history of the cemetery and how much it meant, and how much they're worth. Man. And the scoutmaster, Mark Porter, said, okay, guys, he said, I think a prayer would be in order. And those kids were just all standing around like this. And nobody wanted to speak up. And I got kind of nervous. I got kind of nervous for the scoutmaster. I kept waiting for somebody to say something. And those little boys were just, they were their head hanging down, and all of a sudden the littlest scout stepped forward. And he said the most beautiful prayer I've ever heard. And he talked about the very same thing I just said, that we're all the same, we're all equal, and everyone out here has a story to tell, and he thanked God that we were able to be out here and work together that day with his buddies to contribute to cleaning it up. And I sent his dad an email that night, and he said, "That's the most beautiful prayer, adopted child I've ever heard." And the courage it took for that little boy to step forward meant so much to all of us. But I thank y'all for coming. Bobby, did you have?
Could I say one? Could I say one?
Yeah.
I brought with me, I just put together when we were going through this, I didn't always remember, but I would take pictures out here. This doesn't, I just didn't think of it at first, and so I didn't take the initial part of how bad it was out here. But there are pictures of folks that you recognize in here who came out and worked on the cemetery, what the road looked like when it was first put in, and you might enjoy going through it. You're welcome to do it. I'm going to give it to Jessica. Where'd Jessica go?
She had to leave.
Oh, she had to leave. I'm going to give it to Jessica from the museum, and I was going to, and then Joe asked if I'd speak tonight, so I'll retire it at the museum after tonight.
Well, thank you, John. Bobby, remind me of something.
No, but we want, for sure, we have refreshments back here, get something to drink, a few cookies, and wander through this beautiful cemetery. Don't leave without doing that.
I'll tell you, when you wander through the cemetery, be careful where you step, because it's very easy to trip. It's kind of hard to see some of the small stones. Be very careful. I've fallen out here during the march. Thank y'all for coming, Madeline. Would you
Yeah, I wanted,
wait just a minute?
I just wanted to say something. This is very emotional. Particularly since it's Mother's Day week. My mother worked on this. I'm sorry, I can't even talk. I haven't been back in Kernersville that long. Most of the time that she was working on this, actually, I was in Northern Virginia. And then she had lots of big projects in her life. But in her later life, this and building Bethlehem Center in Winston-Salem were her big projects. And I just want to thank you. This is, in many ways, to me personally, a tribute to her, because she worked on this, and she started by herself and just was determined that this was going to get done. I'm fortunate enough that a lot of my family's graves that are here are marked, and I come and talk to the original Sarah Elizabeth from time to time, who I never knew, but who my mother was named for, and my great-great-grandparents are here, and those graves are clearly marked, so I can often come here. And I just want to thank you. I mean, part of the reason I came to the Historical Society initially when I moved back actually to Winston to bring my mother to the meeting, and I continued to come mainly because I knew this group was the custodian for the graveyard, and I just want to thank you. I had no idea I was going to cry today, and I guess it's Mother's Day weekend. I've really had her on my mind, so thank you. I'm I'm not a sentimental person. My mother was. I'm a much more practical, systematic person. So this is kind of a surprise. So.
Spiritual business.
Oh, beg your pardon?
Spiritual business.
Yes. Well, I kind of talked to Sarah Elizabeth and Rhoda and Papa. And I have a lot of their stuff. I'm still cleaning out my mother's house. And I mean, I'm just still finding stuff about the graveyard. So I'll try to get it all organized.
And we would love for you to share it with us.
Yeah, well, she was a scrap of paper kind of person. So they're just notes on everything, everywhere. You know, in the kitchen drawer with the silverware. I mean, I'm just finding stuff everywhere. So, but
That's why
thank
she
you.
and my mother were.
Oh, it's just.
Thank you, madam.
She said, well, after Rhoda died, he married this young girl. She's not buried here. I don't know where she ended up buried. And she wanted a car. Okay. And he had a wagon, but she wanted a car and something else. So he sold the land. And
To give her a car.
Oh. And I think she was just one of those
The little train.
bye-bye.
That little train.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even though the farm was down there and maybe when I was a teenager, my mother pointed out where it was. But when I moved back here, I said, Mom, where exactly was the farm? And she wasn't sure, but it's near where the Y is. I think a little bit closer into town than that. But they lived on Main Street, right?
Long, many-year project that I went through with Lisa, and the great memories of what I wrote down last night, a wonderful, energized, go-get-em woman who I not only respected, but became Evan White was an 8th grader many years ago. And he said, I enjoy the link between Kernersville Middle School and the historic cemetery. Serving the community shows people that we are caring and being raised to think of other people. This is important because the cemetery is part of our town's history. These people were an integral part of our history long ago. And Sarah said what Joe said. There are over 200 people buried here. It's important for people to have the history that's found. I get asked, are there any prominent citizens buried here? I tell them, everyone here is prominent. They made Kernersville what it is today. These are sacred grounds, and I hope that you all will continue your efforts in the support of the cemetery. I understand that this is y'all's key project for 2017, getting groups together, developing a plan to address the current and future needs of this cemetery. All I can say is thank you all very, very much for what you're doing. Not only am I appreciative, but there's a good woman up in heaven who's looking down and she's appreciative of it too. Thank you.
Like I said before, come out here one day when you've got about an hour and just start walking through and imagine the people that are buried out here. I often hear it in my church, Main Street Methodist, and manicured and maintained it is with the expensive markers, and compare it to this cemetery, and it makes you realize it doesn't matter. We're all the same. And it takes a place like this to open up your eyes and make you realize that. I never will forget, I was out here about a year ago, and I had some scouts from Main Street Methodist, and they'd worked hard. They really worked hard. And the scoutmaster said, I wish you'd gather these boys around. We were about halfway through, and explain to them what they've done, what they're doing, how important it is. So I did. I called them all around and told them a little bit of the history of the cemetery and how much it meant, how much their work meant. And the scoutmaster, Mark Porter, said, "Okay, guys," he said, "I think prayer would be in order." And those kids just all standing around like this. Nobody wanted to speak up. And I got kind of nervous. I got kind of nervous with the scoutmaster. Waiting for somebody to say something. Those little boys were just, they were their head hanging down, and all of a sudden the littlest scout stepped forward, and he said the most beautiful prayer, and he talked about the very same thing I just said. We're all the same, we're all equal, and everyone out here has a story to tell. Thank God that we were able to be out here together that day with his buddies to contribute to cleaning it up. And I sent his dad an email that night. I said, "That's the most beautiful prayer of the orphan child I've ever heard." And the courage it took for that little boy to step forward meant so much. But I thank y'all for coming. Bobby, did you have your dad?
I brought with us, I just put together when we were going through this, I didn't always remember, but I would take pictures out here. This doesn't, I just didn't think of it at first, and so I didn't take the initial part of how bad it was out here. But there are pictures of folks that you recognize in here who came out and worked on the cemetery, what the road looked like when it was first put in, and you might enjoy going through it. You're welcome to do it. I'm going to give it to Jessica. I'm going to give it to Jessica to the museum, and I was going to, and then go ask if I'd speak tonight. So I'll retire at the museum after tonight.
No, but we want, for sure. We have refreshments back here, get something to drink, a few cookies, and wander through this beautiful cemetery. Don't leave without doing that.
And please, when you wander through the cemetery, be careful where you stay, because it's very easy to trip. It's kind of hard to see some of the small stones. Be very careful. I've fallen out here several times. Thank y'all for coming, Madeline.
I just wanted to say something. Maybe I can't. This is very emotional.
bittersweet, particularly since it's Mother's Day week. My mother worked on this, and I'm sorry, I can't even talk. I haven't been back in Kirksville that long. Most of the time that she was working on this, actually, I was in Northern Virginia. And then she had lots of big projects in her life. But in her later life, this and building Bethlehem Center, and it's the site of her big projects. I just want to thank you. This is in many ways to personally a tribute to her because she worked on this. She started by herself and this was determined that this was going to get done. I'm fortunate enough that a lot of my family's graves that are here are marked. And I come and talk to the original Sarah Lisbon from time to time, who I never knew. And my mother was named and my great-grandparents were here. And those graves are clearly marked, so I can often come here. And I just want to thank you. Part of the reason I came to the Historical Society initially when I moved back actually to Winston to bring my mother to the meeting. And I continued to come mainly because I knew this group was the custodian for the graveyard. And I just want to thank you. I had no idea I was going to cry today. And I guess it's Mother's favorite one. I really had her in my mind. So thank you. I'm not a sentimental person. My mother was. I'm a much more practical, systematic person.
Spiritual visitation.
Oh, beg your pardon?
Spiritual visitation.
Yes. Well, I come and talk to Sarah Elizabeth and Rhoda and Papa. And I have a lot of their stuff. I'm still cleaning out my mother's house. And, I mean, I'm just still finding stuff that really knows. So I'll try to get it all organized. And, yeah, well, she was a scrap of paper kind of person. So they're just notes on everything, everywhere. You know, in the kitchen drawer with the silverware. I mean, I'm just finding stuff everywhere. So, but thank you. Oh, it's She said, well, after Rhoda died, he married this young girl. She's not buried here. I don't know where she ended up buried. And she wanted a car. Okay. He had a wagon, but she wanted a car and something else. So he sold the land. And and I think she was just one of those
The little train.
bye-bye.
That little train. Yes.
And even though the farm was down there and maybe when I was a teenager, my mother pointed out where it was. But when I moved back here, I said, Mom, where exactly was the farm? And she wasn't sure, but it's near where the Y is. I think a little bit closer into town than that. But they lived on Main Street, right